Friends, the subject that has been given to me today is media's role towards judicial reforms. I must, at the outset, say that this is a concern that most of the members of my profession, in fact, the institution of media, would not quite relate to, because we don't believe the way we are structured. We don't quite believe that the judiciary is in need of being saved. And that's what this banner here says, save judiciary. Our attitude is much like that of what you find many of these crooks coming in front of TV cameras when they are caught in various cases, saying that we have full faith in the judiciary. In fact, you could almost assume a certain direct proportionality to it. The bigger the crook, the greater his faith in the judiciary. That's something that should make us think about the nature of this institution. Why does it command such confidence in these crooks? They find it to be eminently pliable, amenable to their exertions through lawyers, through, as Elizabeth said, pseudo lawyers, or lawyers who actually behave like touts. Now that kind of an attitude has pervaded media as well. When my generation entered the profession in 80s, we saw it essentially as a civil society institution. You are all civil society, and we saw ourselves as part of civil society. But I'm sorry to say that in the years since then, partly because of liberalization or what have you, now we see ourselves essentially as part of an infotainment industry. We are here to provide entertainment to you. We are here, information is incidental to it, and we don't see ourselves as a watchdog institution anymore. We are part of this gigantic media industry that is focused on the bottom line. Now, in the process, certain, unintended consequences may flow. For instance, I was supposed to be speaking yesterday at this conference, but I could not come because of one very happy reason, which is that, suddenly the brand team in my organization, I work for the Times of India, the biggest newspaper, one very eminent example of media being turned into essentially an infotainment industry. Now, the brand team in Times of India decided that it makes good sense, good commercial sense, to focus attention on corruption, political corruption. Why? Because suddenly there's been a spate of scams involving crooked politicians, and there's a great deal of public outrage. So it makes eminent business sense to tap that feeling. So let's focus on it. So suddenly, civil society concerns have become very central to us. Suddenly somebody like me is called to say, look, we're going to be doing a campaign, running a campaign. And for 4 consecutive days, in a rather unforeseen development, I found myself given space that I could never have asked for, could never have, have even imagined. Today, for instance, suddenly a whole page given. People like, I spent time with Prashant Bhushan and Arvind Kejriwal to understand what is this proposal they have come up with, how it is better than the official draft of Lokpal. Now, normally what civil society stalwarts say would have been dismissed as the rantings of some jholawalas. It doesn't really matter. How does, just be realistic. It is what the government decides. It's those power wielders who decide. What they have in mind, that is all that matters. But suddenly, because of this awakening in people, political corruption has been recognized by a media organization. Now, I'm not saying this only to make fun of my organization. It is for, to convey to you that there is something interesting that's happening here. And we should look at it strategically. That we should try and bring that kind of a criticality. This issue of judicial reforms, also we should think strategically to, give it that kind of critical mass to make organizations like Times of India, recognize the importance of that, give it the kind of space it requires, so that Times of India is jolted out of, not just Times of India, I'm citing that as an example because it's a very powerful brand. So it's for you to understand that, so that, these mainstream organizations recognize that judicial reforms is also a very serious concern, so that they are jolted out of this complacency, this myth that Prashant was pointing out a while ago, which vested interests propagate, that all is fine with the judiciary, especially in the higher ranks. If there is any problem, it's only in the lower judiciary. So for us, it is very convenient to see judiciary as also army as some kind of a holy cow. So when somebody like me wants to do something concerning judicial accountability, it's something that doesn't quite resonate with them. They suffer me now and then if there's some news that they just can't avoid, but most of the time, it's relegated to the back pages or not denied any space or not given any space at all. But as I said, when situation becomes conducive, an issue like an issue like political corruption, gets center stage treatment, it's given ample space. So we need to think in such terms. Now, part of the problem, related to this issue of the media turning from a civil society institution into an infotainment industry, is that we journalists have transformed from watchdog journalists to access journalists. I'll explain to you briefly what I mean by that. And that in turn has a bearing on the subject of what media can do or does not do vis-a-vis judicial reforms. Now, you've all recently been witness to this scam called radio tapes. You saw one very eminent journalist, I use eminent within quotes, a very senior member of my profession, giving advice to the lobbyist of a very big industrialist from your town on how the judiciary could be fixed. She is asking him, look, there is this big gas dispute coming before you, and the Bombay High Court gave a crazy verdict which is against national interest in her perception. So now how do we ensure that the Supreme Court does the right thing by us? Now she is asking the editor of one big publication. Now you would assume that a newspaper editor or a magazine editor would be driven only by public interest. He would not share the concerns, the priorities of a corporate lobbyist. But what do you see him saying on that phone conversation? Look, your client has no idea how to fix the judiciary. I know better.